Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
I want to watch this second thought video. Why the United States can handle crises. Let's check it out. Let's do it.
This episode was made in collaboration with Ugopnik. Be sure to check out their video after this. If you were born at any point after the 80s, odds are the entirety of your lived experience has been one of crisis. For people my age, our formative years were filled with the consequences of US activity. Our earliest memories include 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq under false pretenses. Then we had the 2008 housing crash, the realization that climate change was nearing a point of no return, the acceleration of suicidal deregulation and privatization, which has left our infrastructure weak and fragile, the skyrocketing cost of tuition, saddling young people who were told college was the only way to succeed with insurmountable debt and increasingly worthless degrees.
And it's skyrocketing. Why is it skyrocketing, chat? We covered it earlier. It's skyrocketing because of state funding cuts for higher education. Explains 100% of the increase in college tuition. The Republicans and the neo-libs cut funding for higher ed. That's it. That's why you have debt and your parents don't.
We've seen the birth and rapid rise of the gig economy, relegating huge portions of the population to precarity and poverty. And of course, we've watched our COVID response become the worst in the world, despite having advanced knowledge of the danger and plenty of resources to handle the situation appropriately. For millennials and younger generations, there's no such thing as the good old days. We never experienced them. We'll cover that topic more thoroughly in a future video, but in this week's episode, we're going to examine why the US seems to be completely incapable of handling crises. Now, this video could easily be over an hour long. The past few decades have seen an alarming acceleration in crisis mismanagement, and it would take way too long to cover them all. We're just going to focus on a handful of them. Before we get to the big ones, let's start with a very American problem: obesity. At first glance, you wouldn't necessarily think to call obesity a crisis. But when you look at the numbers in the US, things become a bit more grim. As of 2018, 42.4% of all American adults were obese. That number increased drastically between 2000 and 2018, shooting up by nearly 12%, while severe obesity nearly doubled, from 4.7% to 9.2%. Obesity among children is also a big problem. Of children between the ages of 2 and 19, nearly 1 in 5 are obese. Now, obesity doesn't just mean you're a bit overweight. It's a serious health condition, and it comes with a whole slew of problems: heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and increased susceptibility to certain types of cancer, not to mention a lower quality of life and shorter average lifespan. The fact that nearly half of American adults are obese should be a huge red flag. According to one study conducted in 2008, the estimated annual medical cost of obesity in the US was a staggering $147 billion. And judging by the increased prevalence of obesity in the years since, we can only assume that cost has risen dramatically. Obesity causes nearly 1 in 5 deaths in the US. That's a crisis, and it's not talked about nearly enough. Now, some people will simply tell those suffering from obesity to eat better, and that's not unreasonable. But the roots of the crisis go far beyond individual...
Okay, first of all, Americans are not they're not obese because of individual choice. It's the systems that we have in place. It's really just that simple. That's why fat shaming people is bad. That's why abusing someone over their body type is wrong. Even when I do it, it's not the right thing to do. It's wrong. The fat people stock footage, though, is triggering me. I'm not going to lie. I've learned how to make glazed donuts at home, and that's all I've been eating the past 3 days. Please send help. That sounds badass, actually.
Responsibility. Back in the 50s, President Eisenhower had a heart attack, which sparked a scientific debate over the causes of obesity, which was known to cause heart disease. There were 2 main schools of thought. One led by British physiologist and nutritionist John Yudkin, and the other by Ancel Keys, an American physiologist. Yudkin believed that obesity was mainly caused by sugar, and Keys thought it was caused by fat. Eventually, it became apparent that Yudkin was correct. Sugar was the culprit behind the condition. But wait, if we identified the cause all the way back in the 50s, why is the problem so much worse today?
Can't wait. Dang,
well,
that sounds
the sugar
awesome.
industry didn't take kindly to the scientific findings. They funded disinformation campaigns and lobbied the government to support the low-fat diet initiative in an attempt to maintain their profits. This not only helped them keep their current profits, it also drastically increased them because in order to make low-fat foods appealing to an American palate, manufacturers had to add more sugar. So, the result of a scientific study clearly linking sugar to obesity was not the reduction of sugar in our diets, but a massive disinformation campaign that ended up increasing the amount of sugar in our foods, thereby worsening the very problem we wanted to solve. Keep this result in mind, because you'll begin to notice a pattern. So, what have we done to combat obesity in the decades since the initial studies? Well, not much. Some states have tried to implement sugar taxes, but on the whole, we haven't even made a dent in the crisis. It's only getting worse. In the case of obesity...
Isn't obesity very much an issue that mostly targets the lower caste since the food is cheaper, faster, easier to access? Well, it's funny because I worked with someone who was a candidate for office who ended up winning. And they looked into this and they found out, they did a study and they subsidized high quality produce in a few grocery stores, and they watched the buying patterns change. When the high quality produce was cheaper, people diets changed. People are not buying this food because of all the reasons that people suspect. It's actually because it's just they don't have a lot of money and you get more calorie bang for your buck out of this stuff.
Not only have we failed to handle it, our capitalist system caused it. A giant industry wanted to keep making money, so they threw the American people under the bus, and we've been dealing with the same problem for well over half a century now. Let's move on to one of the big crises, one that affects not only the US, but the entire world: climate change. Whether you think humans are influencing the climate change or not, the data is clear. Our climate is changing dramatically and rapidly. Sea ice is melting at unprecedented rates, causing a rise in sea level. The oceans are becoming more acidic, leading to the annihilation of coral reefs. Violent weather events have become far more common, and we're beginning to see thousand-year storms, droughts, and floods every few years. Thousands of species are at risk of extinction. Disease is able to spread farther and faster thanks to longer warm seasons, and entire regions are becoming unlivable. In early 2020, I helped shoot a documentary called The Final Years of Majuro, which documented the effects of sea level rise in the Marshall Islands. I saw firsthand what will happen to the world's coastal regions and islands. They're going underwater. Their populations will have to evacuate or be destroyed. Since the US likes to think of itself as the leader of the world, surely we're at the forefront of climate change mitigation, right? Well, no. In fact, we're not even close. The United States is one of the few places on Earth where elected officials...
That's Senator Inhofe from what state, chat? Pop quiz, chat. What state is Senator Inhofe from? Show me you're a politics, Andy. Show me you're a politics, Andy. Guadalupe has got it right. Oklahoma. Yeah, got it right. Good job.
We're not even close. The United States is one of the few places on Earth where elected officials openly deny the existence of climate change. The climate doesn't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Or, to quote a certain internet person, facts don't care about your feelings. We have the facts. Climate change is happening. So why do our politicians, even the ones who acknowledge the crisis, refuse to address the problem? You won't be surprised to learn that once again, corporate interests stand in the way. In order to understand the present situation, let's take a trip back to the late 70s. Towards the end of the decade and into the 80s, Exxon was at the forefront of climate research. Not because they particularly cared about the planet, but because they wanted to understand the effects of the changing climate to better position themselves against the competition in the future. For example, when they began drilling in the Beaufort Sea in the Canadian Arctic, Exxon scientists wondered whether the increased CO2 emissions would warm the region enough to make the voyage and extraction less treacherous, and therefore more profitable. With goals like these in mind, Exxon began conducting some of the most thorough climate change studies to date. Between 1986 and 1992, the company used and developed cutting-edge models to understand the effects of CO2 and other greenhouse gases on the climate, accumulating incredibly valuable data. To use the Beaufort Sea example again, Exxon scientists determined that should atmospheric CO2 concentration double, and they predicted it would by 2050, the region's open water season would lengthen from 2 months to 3, possibly even 5. They underestimated how quickly atmospheric CO2 would accumulate, But they were exactly correct about the lengthening of the Beaufort open water season. And this is just one example. Their models also accurately predicted rising temperatures, dramatic weather, severe ice loss.
Buchnator says, my brother opened a grocery store in South Chicago with Catholic Charities and the CCHA. They discounted healthier food options, and there were only fresh produce supply for a decent-sized areas. Habits did not change. In general, these people still bought the same stuff regardless of price and availability. It was a very small grocery store. I mean, one of the things about that is, I don't doubt you. I don't doubt you. But what I would say is that there has been a number of studies on this, and price and availability seems to be a very important part. The other part is knowledge of how to prepare and time. So when you don't have the knowledge to how to prepare healthier food, you don't have the time to prepare healthier food, or you don't have the equipment. Cooking requires investment. You have to have money to have the cooking supplies. You need to have pots, pans, all those other things to cook. That's not free. So, and it takes skill. Like, cooking is something that takes actual knowledge and skill to do. So, and that's not even talking about the addictive nature of things like caffeine and refined sugars, right? So you're looking at a huge issue that began with price and availability, convenience, and then lack of knowledge. Like when you cut home economics classes where people learn the skills of how to cook, that's something that goes away. And when the easier and more convenient option is also so dangerous and unhealthful, you can understand why people who are tired from low-wage work might go towards those options. Salt and fat and sugar literally changes your taste buds. When you're raised on processed foods, a real food does not taste good. No one talks about this when talking about food.
Droughts, floods,
Cooking
and
with
all
Mike
manner
segment?
of other
Oh, God.
consequences to their actions. And
No.
all of this was collected not with the intention of curbing the fallout, but of understanding how they could best position themselves to take advantage of the changing climate. As discourse around climate change heated up, so to speak, Exxon was in a position to do some real good. They had some of the best data available, and it would have made a huge difference in understanding how best to mitigate the consequences of climate fallout. Instead, they chose to do the same thing the sugar industry did. They funded opposition groups, launched disinformation campaigns, and buried their own internal studies so that the public would never learn what they had discovered. For decades, Exxon and other oil and gas giants
Isn't
paid
this
huge
amazing?
sums of money to suppress the facts and lobby
This is
politicians
unbelievable.
to sow confusion and distrust of established science.
Yeah, we talked
it
about the
wasn't
Tim
until
Pool
the
catniping
mid-2000s that
yesterday.
Exxon finally distanced themselves from some of the more outspoken climate denial groups, like the Competitive Enterprise Institute. But to this day, they play a major role in subverting the effort to do anything at all about climate change. And they continue to fund climate-denying politicians who help secure oil and gas profits, to the detriment of the entire human race. Exxon denies this, of course, but if you'd like to see the evidence for yourself, I've left links to their internal documents and to an investigative study on the matter in the description. Today, thanks in no small part to the greed of fossil fuel companies, we are years behind where we should be when it comes to mitigating climate fallout. Heck, in the US, we can't even agree it's happening at all. So again, just like with the obesity crisis, we're not only incapable of solving the problem, our capitalist system created the problem. Let's move on to our final big crisis, coronavirus. We're now right around the 1-year mark for when Americans really began to realize just how serious the problem was. In the past year, over 500,000 Americans have died of COVID. We've had more cases and more deaths than anywhere else on Earth. This is despite the
Yeah, I mean, the Garland confirmation happened. I don't really care much about it until something relevant happens. Schools in Scandinavia teach cooking and home education at school. Do they do this at the US? In a wealthier school district, they do.
fact that we have almost limitless resources to spend on overcoming crises like this one. If we're really the greatest country on Earth, why has our coronavirus response been one of, if not the worst in the world? As always, to better understand the situation, we need to rewind a bit. When COVID first came to the States, the official response, as with climate change, was denial. It immediately became a political
Wow, that's
issue.
terrible.
If Trump were to take the necessary measures to ensure the public's safety, he believed he would have tanked his approval rating and his economic numbers. Unsurprisingly, both tanked anyway after Americans started dropping like flies. But the story of our COVID response is not just about
S. Theno says, guys, I have a question. Say we never discovered fossil fuels. Would it be possible to ever develop green energy systems without the predecessor of fossil fuels? This isn't pro-fossil fuel, by the way. It seems that fossil fuels provided us a huge store of relatively cheap and easy to access energy, which really is what powered the Industrial Revolution. So I question if we would have been able to do so without fossil fuels.
Politics. A disease outbreak is perhaps the only thing able to reveal all the little cracks in the country's armor at the same time. Conservatives declared we didn't want to go into lockdown because that was government overreach, a rallying cry taken up by
we're gonna do the
conservative
Cuomo
voters.
oppressor
Of course,
at
the
one,
politicians and wealthy business moguls didn't really care about government overreach. They just wanted to make sure American workers kept working so the executives could maintain their profits. Once it became apparent that we would have to enforce some kind of lockdown, things started to snowball. Many American businesses operate on razor-thin margins to reduce costs and maximize profits. So when they lost business, they immediately had to lay off their workers in order to weather the storm. Since American healthcare is tied to employment, those millions of workers suddenly found themselves without a paycheck or access to medical care if they became sick. You know, something that happens quite often in a pandemic. Since our country lacks even the barest provisions for the unemployed, millions of households soon ran out of money. They couldn't pay rent. Landlords are some of those people who run dangerously lean operations, relying on their tenants' rent checks to pay off their properties. They begin to evict their tenants. Over the next few months, millions of Americans contract COVID, and our bizarre obsession with freedom led many to refuse to.
Chat, look at these fucking hogs. Holy shit, look at these fucking hogs, man. Slaves wore masks. We will not comply. NoMaskNevada.com. I want you to imagine being this dumb. I want you to experience, put yourself in the mindscape of someone this stupid.
Wear a mask, a tiny, simple piece of cloth that's proven to be effective in helping prevent the spread of disease. Our case numbers
I've
exploded,
seen all of these
becoming
things.
the worst in the
We've
world.
covered all of these
Hospitals were
events.
overrun. We had to start digging mass graves. The people who could get a hospital bed could no longer afford the medical bills because they didn't have insurance. Hundreds of thousands of people went into tremendous debt because the US is the only developed country not to have some form of universal health care. While the country was falling apart, Democrats and Republicans alike continued to make the situation
free.
worse.
Life is so simple.
Republicans railed against mask mandates and asserted that the disease was no worse
Sometimes
than
when he
the flu.
pauses the video, he reacts to something silently. I think my stream is live. I think that sometimes silence and kind of taking it all in is a good reaction, but maybe I should use that. Look at Lord Bobert! Look at this gun fucker! Look, I got a shotgun. I got my everyday carry, and then I got two different types of black rifles. Yeah, I said it. They're black rifles. I own these consumer products. I use my money. Sir Gameslayer, you're welcome, bud.
Or that it was a Chinese hoax, and the Democrats paid lip service to the science but lied about how well they were handling their city's outbreaks. But the politicians are not the only ones to blame. The general public must bear some of the shame as well. Despite mountains of data on both how dangerous the disease is and how other countries have been able to contain it, Americans flock to beaches, parties, restaurants, and the Super Bowl because, damn it, it's my God-given right as an American.
Okay.
Our bullheaded...
So this, I'm going to take a moment and provide you value that no other streamer can. So what we have right here, it appears to me that we've got a B-52, we have a B-2, and I think this is a B-1. These are America's heavy strategic bombers. Now, what are heavy strategic bombers for? Well, I'm glad you asked. Heavy strategic bombers are for nuclear weapon attacks. They've been occasionally used for like precision guided, attacking, say, like the B-2's been used to attack air defense networks before we invaded Iraq, as an example. Do you know how much it costs per B-2? Per B-2 stealth bomber, how much do they cost each? All right, B-2 bomber per unit cost. According to Wikipedia, the per unit cost is $737 million each. They spent $45 billion on them, and they got 21. And that's in 2017, though. So if we do inflation, that's over $1 billion. $1 billion each. And not only do we not have... So we have one strategic bomber, right? Although the B-2 was supposed to be a mainly nuclear bomber, it was first used in combat to drop normal bombs on Serbia. It was used during the Iraq War, and it's being used in the war in Afghanistan. Why not, right? And then we have the B-1. The B-1, they built 104 of them. They cost $200 million per aircraft. So we have 3 different strategic heavy bombers. And it also costs a tremendous amount of money to maintain these things. We're not even talking about the maintenance costs, because these things cost an ungodly amount of money to maintain. We were just talking about how Internet for All is only $100 billion. $100 billion to give everybody gigabit internet up and down. And that's today's cost. That's a bill that's being advanced by the Democrats right now. They're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on heavy strategic nuclear bombers. We don't need these for the war on terror. Their purpose is to fly, they were developed to fly nukes to enemy cities and nuke them. Part of the nuclear triad. The triad being nuclear submarines, ICBM missiles, and heavy strategic bombers. We're the only country dumb enough to continue to maintain this crap.
Because damn it, it's my God-given right as an American. Our bullheaded stubbornness and
my mayor took Mike's advice and started unilaterally conquering suburbs and small cities. We're actually breaking away from the state soon. Poggers. Yeah. Sir Gameslayer, I actually would encourage you to take a look at a website called Local Progress, where it talks about regionalism. I know that you think that you're owning me or something, but in fact, everybody who knows what they're talking about is embarrassed about your community. You're an embarrassment, but go check it out. If you really do care about like local politics, which I don't think that you do, but if you do, go check out Local Progress, and they talk about regionalism. I also have a video on it. You should check it out. We should do free education, free healthcare, neolibs. But how do you pay for it? While billion-dollar bombers paid for by taxpayers fly over the Super Bowl. Amazing, isn't it? Biden administration should consider reducing the size of the defense budget. The brief encourages President Biden to consider reducing the size of the total defense budget from the proposed $755 billion to about $700 billion. Halting procurement of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which has serious design and software flaws. Instead, building more B-21 bombers. What's a B-21? Is this a drone? It's an American heavy bomber? Oh my god. They're making another one. They're making another heavy bomber. Just mind-boggling stupidity. It has to be advanced, very long-range, large, heavy payload, stealth, intercontinental strategic bomber. Why? We do not need this. This is so stupid. At a cost of $550 million per unit. $550 million per. 200 in service? Why? For what enemy? Who are we having why do we need a capability of 200 heavy strategic bombers? Honestly, Mike, we can't pay. How can we pay to provide childcare? Well, here we're going to be buying 200 heavy strategic bombers. I want to show you something, chat. This is amazing. This is fucking amazing. The Congressional Budget Office in a new report highlights the rising cost of current plans to sustain and upgrade U.S. nuclear forces. The CBO estimates that the nuclear weapons spending plans President Trump inherited from Obama will cost taxpayers $1.2 trillion. When the effects of inflation are included, the 30-year cost would approach $1.7 trillion. $100 billion to give everybody gigabit Ethernet, or $1.7 trillion on nukes. Yay! We should spend 100. Oh my God! How are you gonna pay for it, man? Oh, you want to have clean water? Oh, we can't afford it. 1.7 on nukes, though. We need to have the B. I mean, I didn't know about the B-21 Raider. I am embarrassed to say that I had never heard of it. I'm embarrassed to say that I have not heard of the B-21 Raider that they're going to buy 200 of at $550 per. That would pay for a lot of student debt. That's more than our entire student debt. In 2016, the U.S. Air Force stated they would not release the estimated cost for the B-21 contract with Northrop Grumman, arguing that releasing the cost would reveal too much information about the classified project. They don't even want to tell you how much it costs. What a democracy we live in. I am baffled that this is real fucking life. This is real fucking life, chat. And neolibs defend this shit. They defend it. They defend this. They actually defend this crap. Does this count the trillions being funneled into deep black projects? Holy fucking hell, man. Yeah, I heard about the Cuomo news conference. We'll watch it. If anybody has a link to it, that'll be useful. Well, Mike, the Iranians might have a nuke, so we need trillions of dollars worth of nukes. If America had put all that money and spent it on war on infrastructure instead, we'd be Wakanda right now. Why are you laughing? It's true. First of all, I'm not even being a peacenik and saying we should get rid of all nukes. But you know, if we have 100 nukes, that's probably enough. No one's gonna nuke us. We have 100 nukes. We can credibly use them as a deterrent, which is the only purpose of them. Do we need $1.7 trillion of nukes? This is an absurd fucking waste of an unbelievable amount. In B-21, it was formerly named Raider in honor of the Doolittle Raiders. The American Government Accountability Office released a report on 25 October 2016 that sustained the Air Force's decision to award the LRS-B contract to Northrop Grumman. Cost was revealed to be the deciding factor in selecting Northrop Grumman over the Boeing and Lockheed Martin team. The Air Force is planning to acquire a new long-range fighter known as Penetrating Counter-Air that would accompany the B-21 Raider deep into enemy territory. I'm seriously contemplating moving back to Bolivia and working remotely from there. America gives me 24/7 heartburn.
Would cost a fraction of what we pay if the government actually did the work instead of contracting it out to war profiteers.
Yeah, that's the other factor, that the free market, the market is total garbage. Holy fuck,
Genocidal
man.
selfishness has contributed countless bodies to the pile. How many of you watching have lost a loved one to COVID? Their death was completely avoidable. Take countries like Vietnam or New Zealand. These places absolutely destroyed the virus. Despite Vietnam's proximity to China, COVID rolls in and they're like, nope, not gonna let this happen. They implement strict lockdown measures, social distancing, and contact tracing immediately. Would you like to see their COVID stats compared to ours? Here you go. Pretty stark difference.
Thank you,
to those of you who feel
yeah.
the need to say, well, they have a smaller
fucking
population, take a look at the per capita death rate. Vietnam has about a third of the US population, so we would assume that they'd have a third the number of deaths, right? Not even close. Vietnam, a country with a GDP of $261 billion, absolutely destroyed the US, a country with a GDP of $20 trillion, in terms of COVID response effectiveness. Of course, you won't hear about this. It's not the first time the US has decided not to talk about being beaten by the Vietnamese. So yes, by all metrics, the US coronavirus
Motherfucker, that's my joke.
response has been among the worst
That's
in the
my
world.
joke,
Quite
motherfucker.
possibly the worst,
That's my joke. I've
considering
been
the
making that
resources
joke
we
for
have
a
at our
fucking
disposal.
year.
This perfect storm of capitalist fragility laid bare the failures of the most powerful nation on earth. The country, like so many of its businesses, operates on the tiniest of margins.
Exclamation point COVID. Exclamation point COVID. Or is it exclamation point Corona? It's exclamation point Corona. If I could ever spell it. If I could ever spell it.
DSAL.
There it is. This is a long one.
Sau gần đây có một virus rất hot, tên của em ấy Corona.
Em từ đâu quê của em ở Vũ Hán, đang bình yên bỗng chợt thoát ra.
Chắc chắn ta nên nâng cao cảnh giác, đừng để em ấy phát tác.
Chắc chắn ta nên quyết tâm từ xa để dịch bệnh không bùng cháy lên. Cùng giơ tay xoa 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 đều, đừng nên cho tay lên mắt mũi miệng, và hạn chế đi ra nơi đông người để lùi virus corona. Luôn nâng cao sức khỏe và vệ sinh không gian xung quanh mình, cùng nâng cao ý thức của xã hội để lùi virus corona. Tuy nhỏ bé nhưng mà em rất thành ác, bao người phải chết vì chính em.
Tuy rằng khó nhưng toàn dân đang cố gắng, không để em tiếp tục lớn thêm.
Chắc chắn ta nên nâng cao cảnh giác, đừng để em ấy phát tác. Chắc chắn ta nên quyết tâm từ xa để dịch bệnh không bùng cháy lên. Giơ tay xoa 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 đều, đừng nên cho tay lên mắt mũi miệng, và hạn chế đi ra nơi đông người để lùi virus corona. Luôn nâng cao sức khỏe và vệ sinh không gian xung quanh mình, cùng nâng cao ý thức của xã hội để lùi virus corona.
Communism will win, folks. Communism will win. And we have had this. This was published March 2nd, 2020. March 2nd, 2020. Basically the first day of our lockdown. They put out this banger ass song at the very, very start, talking about masks, hand washing, staying away from crowded places, and they shut the fucking disease down. Now, if you've been watching this stream since March of 2020, then you knew this already, because I've been talking about it for a year. About how much Vietnam has beat us, and they've beaten our boys. So that's why I'm like, that's my motherfucking joke, motherfucker.
If we can save a single dollar by not having enough hospital beds or PPE for an emergency, we're gonna do it. If we can make more money by extorting our citizens when they need to go to the doctor, we're gonna do it. Social safety nets cost money, so they're out of the question. So are maternity leave, benefits, pensions, and fair wages. Every single aspect.
Look at that, chat. Disappearing pensions, percent of workforce with pensions. That is the legacy of neoliberalism right there. How's your 401k looking right now, chat? You got enough for savings for retirement there? How's your 401k looking? Looking good, huh?
Every single aspect of our modern life is meticulously crafted to yield ever-increasing profits. And the tiniest grain of sand in the gears of this machine completely destroys our fragile equilibrium. We're not equipped to handle crises because crisis management isn't profitable. We just ignore our problems and hope things work out. This is fine for those at the top. They have the wealth to weather a year-long crisis. 99% of Americans do not. What is it going to take to get the people of this country to realize that not only can we not handle crises, our predatory capitalist system actively
Vietnam and China are not really friendly because China colonized Vietnam.
causes the crises? Capitalism cannot and will not solve the problems it creates. We have a homelessness crisis at the same time as an excess of housing. Why? Housing the homeless isn't profitable. We maintain low-level wars for decades at tremendous cost of human life. Why? Because war is profitable. The military-industrial complex is one of our biggest industries. It's why we ignore humanitarian crises like the war in Yemen. The United States arms the people responsible for the massacre. What happens when the next crisis is worse? How many Americans have to die before we realize that capitalism is destroying us? We already have another ticking time bomb on the horizon. Each successive generation is less well off than the previous one. Older generations, those who experienced the final years of comfort for the average American worker, are dying off. Younger people don't have the buying power their parents and grandparents did. We're having fewer children, mostly because we can't afford to raise children. Fewer children means fewer people to grow up and buy things. What happens when a country built on consumerism runs out of people to buy those products? Consumption falls off a cliff, GDP plummets, businesses flee to other countries, poverty skyrockets, and the American empire implodes. It's not some innate characteristic of the US that makes us incapable of handling crises. Any country with a system as hyper-capitalist as ours would suffer similarly poor performance. If you look around the world, there are plenty of mostly capitalist countries that handled the pandemic much better than the US. What's the difference? They have their guardrails intact. Social safety nets, robust unemployment assistance, universal healthcare. Their citizens are more secure, their businesses less predatory. They haven't deregulated and privatized their countries into oblivion. In America, we've removed those guardrails and stepped on the gas. After all, the biggest profits are right at the edge of the cliff. Capitalism is why we can't handle crises. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that my perspective is very US-centric. It's what I know best. If you'd like to get a more global perspective on this topic, make sure to check out Ugopnik's video next. It's a fantastic companion piece to this video. If you enjoyed this episode, consider dropping a like. If you hated it, a thumbs down. You can check out my previous episodes by clicking the links on your screen. Thanks for watching.
This is a good one
I'll see you next week.
from Second Thought. I like this one from Second Thought. It was good. Man also knows the YouTube game. Genius at the YouTube game. It's pretty clear Americans are broken. I couldn't have imagined a year ago that we let 500,000 people die and not do anything about it. Seriously, what wouldn't we let America get away with? Capitalism is why we can't have nice things. Yeah. Cuomo presser starting now. Okay. Holy shit. You got me. Not Glorifero, you said you were getting me it! You little piece of shit. I swear to God, I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill your ass. I'm gonna kill your fucking ass. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy. The morning politics guy. Politics Frogs in every single day. Same time, 10 a.m. Day in, day out. And we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You gotta follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid, and you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.